Shia, what have you done? What have you done? Shia, what have you done? What have you done? Wallahi.
And so the final blow for the Qaramatah came from another Shia dynasty. This dynasty is called the Uyunids, or Ad-Dawla al-Uyuniyah.
قد أفلح المؤمنون.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وأصحابه الغر الميامين. اللهم لعن أعداءهم من الأولين والآخرين منا إلى يوم الدين. Respected Muslim brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today's discussion is going to be about a group very infamous in Islamic history. And today's discussion is also going to deal with the topic of terrorism within the Islamic world. And this is a very, very sensitive and a very touchy topic. A lot of Muslim scholars refrain from talking about it for a number of reasons. Number one is because it can get very political. And number two, a lot of people feel like whenever they speak about this subject, they may be giving it unnecessary attention. As in, whenever a Muslim scholar speaks about terrorism, there's always the implication that we're trying to cover up something that we should not be discussing. Today, what we're going to be discussing, we are going to be discussing a group in Islamic history known as the Qaramita. What are their origins? What impact did they have on the Islamic world? And what exactly happened to them? And so the reason why we're going to be discussing this is because there have been many groups in the modern Muslim world. Whenever they're accused, they're like, why are there so many terrorist groups that ascribe themselves to Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, especially to the Salafi jihadi group? Every time you'll hear these people saying, these people are not Muslims, we don't consider them Muslims, we don't consider them to be legitimate. But the fact of the matter is, when I list some of these famous names for you, like Bin Laden and al-Zarqawi and al-Baghdadi, these groups all have one thing in common. Or these people have one thing in common, is that they all claim to be Salafis and they all claim to be upholding the Sunnah. And so, unfortunately, instead of simply defending themselves, what some of these people will do, instead of just arguing that, no, we don't consider these people Sunnis, they'll turn around and say the real terrorists are the Shia. And so they'll point to certain groups in Islamic history, like the Assassins. They'll point to the Safavids. And most infamously, they will point to the Qaramita. They will say the Qaramita was a Shia group who wreaked havoc in the Islamic world many, many years ago. And so the Qaramita, their most infamous attack, the most infamous thing these people ever did, was at one point they attacked Mecca, and they attacked the city, and they killed the pilgrims, and they filled the well of Zamzam with their victims, and they stole the black stone and took it back to their headquarters in modern Eastern Day Saudi Arabia, and they kept it there for a very long time. And they only gave it back when a large sum of money was paid by the Abbasid government. And it is said that their leader, Abu Tahir al-Jannabi, la'anahullah, he stood on top of the KABAH after his men had massacred the Hujjaj and Ahl Makkah, and he proclaimed, I am Allah, I am the one who chooses who lives and who dies. And it is said that he used to mock the prophets of Allah, subhanahu wa ta'ala, by saying, all of these men are just maniacs who were once shepherds who got bored of life shepherding animals. And so they decided to make up the idea of religion and Sharia law. And so naturally, to this day, we still have people claiming, the Shia, they attacked Mecca. The Shia, they stopped the Hajj. And I remember last year, there was an infographic, an image that was going around. And I wish I still had it. It was a little image that people were spreading on social media because of the Hajj mostly getting canceled due to the COVID outbreak. This little poster was released saying, these are the times in history when the Hajj has been canceled or the Hajj has been interrupted. And one of them was like, in this year, the Shia Qaramita attacked Mecca and sacked the city, and they stole the black stone. And so to this day, this myth exists. So today, inshallah, what we're going to be discussing this topic, and we're going to break it down in the following stages. Firstly, what exactly is terrorism? When we look back in Islamic history and decide to label a certain group of people as terrorists, what does that mean? What exactly is a terrorist? And why is there often this red line between a terrorist and a freedom fighter? Secondly, we're going to look at the Qaramita and their origin, where exactly they came from, and how exactly they, their idea developed. How did they gain so many followers to get to the point where they could attack the city of Mecca like this? Just commit such horrible, blasphemous acts. Thirdly, we're going to discuss how did the followers of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, of the Imami school, how did they address the Qaramatah? Did they ever write any books refuting the Qaramatah or discussing their beliefs or whether or not they are considered reliable or acceptable? Fourthly, we're going to be discussing when our scholars, they wrote certain things about the Qaramatah, was it just our scholars who were opponents of the Qaramatah, or did we also have political figures? As in what you're going to see, inshallah, is not only did the Shia save the Islamic world from the Qaramatah, but we're the ones who finished them off once and for all. And lastly, we're going to discuss, when it comes to terrorism, which Khalifa is infamously known for ordering his men to attack the cities of Mecca and Medina. And this Khalifa, to this day, there are Sunni Muslims and scholars who will refuse to allow you to curse him. They'll say, you are not allowed to curse this figure. You must revere him. And, we do not take a position. And so first of all, let us dive into this topic, inshallah. So firstly, what is terrorism? Terrorism in modern political science is defined as the following. It is the use of unlawful violence and intimidation on civilians in pursuit of political aims. So what that means is if a certain group has a political objective, they want to take over a country, they want certain resources to be used in a certain way, they want some sort of political change, what this group will do, instead of going to war, instead of fighting the armed forces of a country, they will target the civilians. As in when we talk about the September 11th attacks, we see that Osama bin Laden, la'inahullah, him and his followers, what they decided to do is they decided that, they have a problem with the American government, they have a problem with the American military apparatus, but instead of going to war, instead of fighting the political and military establishment, they decided to target civilians. And as a result, many, many innocent people lost their lives. And so terrorism in Islam is absolutely forbidden. There is no argument for terrorism from a Islamic Sharia law standpoint, because in Islam, we know very well from the campaigns of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he had the following rules in war. Number 1, do not cut down a tree. Number 2, do not kill a woman. Number 3, do not kill a child. Number 4, do not kill a sick person. 5, don't kill the elderly. Number 6, don't kill a monk or a priest. 7, do not destroy a temple or a church. 8, do not disfigure the dead or mutilate their bodies. 9, do not destroy a building unless it's for a military objective. 10, do not kill an animal, except for, an animal that you intend to consume. 11, don't kill those who have surrendered, who have raised the white flag. 12, be good to the prisoners of war. Be humane with your prisoners of war. 13, don't kill those who run away. And 14, don't try to enforce Islam against those who do not accept it willingly. So from these rules that we can derive from the seerah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as well as from the seerah of Amir al-Mu'mineen salamullahi alayhi, when he fought against his opponents at Jamal, which we covered recently, and Safin and Nahrawan, he applied these exact same rules, the same rules as Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Any other regime that claims to be an Islamic regime and does not follow these rules, then they are misrepresenting Islam. These are the rules of war that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he went by and that he commanded us Muslims to go by. Whenever there is a conflict that cannot be resolved peacefully, or whenever the Muslim ummah is in danger and it is forced to defend itself, to wage jihad in order to defend itself, these are the rules that must be followed. And even in the modern day, when we saw Sayyid Ali Sistani give his fatwa for fighting against ISIS, he made it clear that these are the rules that the Mujahideen must follow. When we see certain groups like ISIS and the Taliban, the list goes on, when they claim to represent Islam and they do these things, we of course are the first to condemn them. As unsurprisingly, the biggest victims of these groups are the Shia. Even within the Muslim world, they usually come after who? The Shia, because they know we are among their worst opponents. We do not tolerate such a thing, and we are the first to condemn such actions. So when it comes to the Qaramatah, would we say the Qaramatah are considered a terrorist group? Absolutely. Because the Qaramatah, when we read Islamic history, we see that they not only attacked civilians and they attacked women and children, but they used to commit numerous atrocities. As in even Baytullah al-Haram in Mecca was not sacred enough for them. As in they went into Mecca, the sacred shrine of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they massacred its pilgrims. When it comes to terrorism, in Islamic history, we can look at any group and say, did they target civilians in order to achieve their aims? We say, yes, absolutely. If they targeted civilians, we can say that this is an act of terrorism. As in Muawiyah, we know that in his war with Amir al-Mu'mineen, salamullah alayhi, what he used to do is he used to send groups of horsemen under various commanders to attack the regions that Imam Ali controlled. As in, he sent Busr ibn Arta'a la'anahullah to attack Medina and to attack Mecca and to attack Yemen. And he committed numerous atrocities there. But now, when it comes to the Qaramatah, what is the origin of the Qaramatah? The origin of the Qaramatah is shrouded in mystery. But if we want to know where exactly they come from, one of the best sources we can refer to is a book called the Encyclopedia of Islam. So the Encyclopedia of Islam is a book very, very large. And it is usually, if you go to a university and they offer some sort of Islamic studies, they'll have a the volumes of the Encyclopedia of Islam in the library. So my university has them, but I found a way to access it online for free. So the Qaramatah are said to be a group that were founded by a man named Hamdan Qarmatians, who began his movement in the south of Iraq, in Kufa. And so his movement emphasized the concept of, Bedouin life, of attacking the big city people, attacking the establishment. He emphasized, obedience to the Fatimid Caliph in Egypt, though later the movement dissociated itself from the Fatimid government. And so this movement of his, the way it worked is he used to send out his students, his disciples, his proteges, and they used to go to various areas of the Islamic world recruiting people. And they usually targeted people who are not very well read, not very well educated, people living in rural areas, convincing them that, they needed to take up arms. And unsurprisingly, unfortunately, modern terrorist groups do this a lot. They pop up in areas where the resources are not being distributed equally, and they convince people that violence is the only way to attain equality. And the Qaramatah, very unusually, a lot of scholars, when they look at them, they identify them as an early communist movement within the Islamic world, because a lot of their beliefs are very, very similar to communism, seizing the means of production and distributing them equally. As in, it is very well known that in the state of the Qaramatah and the areas they controlled, they used to give out the money equally, which was not something that the Abbasid government used to do, unfortunately. And so in the Encyclopedia of Islam, it mentions something very interesting. It says, it is to be noted, however, that the Imami scholar Al-Fadl ibn Shadhan of Naysapur, Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhi, who was one of our great early scholars who wrote many books. It is said he wrote 180 books, only a few of which survived, unfortunately. He wrote a refutation of the Qaramatah titled Ar-Rad ala al-Qaramatah. Very creative title, correct? So the Qaramatah, even when their movement first started, the Imamis made it clear that we do not consider these people a valid Muslim group or even a valid Shia group. And so what is the view of the Imami scholars regarding the Qaramatah? So first of all, we pointed to Al-Fadl ibn Shadhan, but someone may say, this Encyclopedia of Islam is an English secondary source. Are there any Arabic primary sources that we can refer to? Absolutely. We can refer to Rijal al-Najashi, which is written by one of our great scholars, Sheikh al-Najashi, who's the author, one of our major Rijali scholars. In his book, Rijal al-Najashi, he mentions the following. He mentions that Al-Fadl ibn Shadhan was a great scholar, and then he mentions the following: وَذَكَرْ الْكِنْجِي أَنَّهُ صَنَّفَ 180 كِتَابًا وَقَعَ إِلَيْنَا مِنْهَا. So he says he wrote 180 books, and he lists all of those books in the scan that I have provided. And those of you who want to see all the books that he wrote, many of them are polemical books. You see Kitab al-Rad ala X, Kitab al-Rad ala Ahl al-Ta'til. Some of these groups that we see on this list that he responded to are dead. As in, our boys took care of business. They finished them off. But towards the end, you'll see I've highlighted Kitab al-Rad ala al-Qaramita. So we see very clearly that Al-Fadl ibn Shadhan, rahimahullah, he wrote a book refuting the Qaramita. Next, we look at another scholar who responded to the Qaramita, and is none other than Shaykh al-Kulayni, rahimahullah, who's famous as the author of Al-Kafi. So the author of Al-Kafi, he wrote other books other than Al-Kafi. One of them was a book titled Ar-Rad ala al-Qaramita. As you can see here, also in Rijal al-Najashi, in his biography of Muhammad ibn Yaqub al-Kulayni نور الله قبره وله غير كتاب الكافي كتاب الرد على القرامطة Kitab, and then he lists other books. And so unfortunately, Shaykh al-Kulayni's book of Ar-Rad ala al-Qaramita, it has not survived. We do not have a copy of it in the modern day. But we know that he wrote it because Najashi recorded this. So we already have Al-Fadl ibn Shadhan, an early scholar, and then we have Kulayni, the author of one of our most important hadith book, the author of Al-Kafi. He also wrote a book refuting the Qaramita. So we can see immediately that to say that the Qaramita were Shia is just as absurd as calling Ibn Taymiyyah a Shia. How can these people be Shia when our major scholars wrote books refuting them? So now let us see what some of our other scholars, I've shown you there are some who wrote books about them. Let us see some of the comments of our great scholars about the Qaramita. So one of them is a Shaykh al-Saduq. Shaykh al-Saduq, as many of you know, is the author of Kitab Man La Yahdharuhu al-Faqih. He's one of our major scholars, and he's considered like an authority when it comes to fiqh, when it comes to many, many fields. And Shaykh al-Saduq, as many of you know, listening to my discussions regarding him, he was very famous for his animosity towards the ghulat. He did not hold back when it came to addressing groups that he considered heretical. So in his book Kamal al-Din wa Itmam al-Ni'mah, he says the following: وَأَمَّا الْقَرَامِطَةِ فَقَدْ نَقَضَتَ الْإِسْلَامِ حَرْفًا حَرْفًا. As for the Qaramita, these people have abandoned Islam letter by letter. لِأَنَّهَا أَبْطَلَتْ أَعْمَالِ الشَّرِيعَةِ. They have completely neglected the Sharia law. وَجَاءَتْ بِكُلْ سَوْفَسْطَائِيَّةِ. I don't know how to say this word. It's basically saying they basically just came up with their own stuff. وَإِنَّ الْإِمَامِ إِنَّمَا يَحْتَاجْ إِلَيْهِ لِلدِّينِ وإقامة حكم الشريعة فإذا جاءت القرامطة تدعي أن جعفر بن محمد أو وصية استخلف رجل دعا إلى نقض الإسلام والشريعة وخروج عما عليه طبائع الأمة لم نحتج في معرفة كذبهم إلى أكثر من دعواهم المتناقض الفاسد الركيك. So in English, for my non-Arabic speakers, what does it say? It says, as for the Qaramita, they have transgressed Islam in all matters, for they have abolished the legal actions and brought all kinds of sophistry to justify themselves. Sophistry is whenever you see someone in a debate where they're trying to just appeal to the emotion of the audience as opposed to using facts to prove their point. This is basically what the Qaramita used to do. And the Imam is required for the existence of the religion and the establishment of legal judgment. Then if the Qaramita come claiming that Ja'far ibn Muhammad, or the executor of his will, has appointed a man who calls towards the violation of Islam and the divine law, or towards the deviation from the traditions of the Ummah, we would not need more than their inconsistent, false, and weak claims in order to recognize their lies. So Shaykh al-Saduq is not holding back at all. He's basically saying these people are completely absurd and ridiculous, and we do not even consider them Muslims, let alone Shia of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. And so this is interesting because the Shaykh makes a very important point. He says if anyone comes claiming that the successor of Ja'far ibn Muhammad claims that we no longer have to follow the Sharia law, then this aqidah is batil. And unfortunately, there are groups today who claim to be Shia, but they believe in an imam other than Sahib al-Zaman, and they claim this imam can change the Sharia. He can just throw out whatever parts of the Sharia he feels like. Those of you who know what I'm talking about, keep it to yourself. And so another one of our scholars, the famous Akhbari scholar, Sheikh Yusuf al-Bahrani, rahmatullahi alayh, he says the following in his book, Kitab al-Kashkul. By the way, I have no idea what al-Kashkul means. So he says, إغارات القرامطة على العراق, the raids of the Qaramita on Iraq, والشام والحجاز. وفي سنة 258 in the year 258 after Hijrah, مبدأ ظهور القرامطة بسواد الكوفة. In this year, the Qaramita appeared in the south of Iraq. وهم خوارج زنادقة. And they are Khawarij, people who have left the religion, Zanadiqa, heretics, Mariquna min ad-din, people who have left or abandoned the religion. So this is one of the great scholars of the Akhbari school of thought. And even though we don't want to run this thing too long, it's worth mentioning something interesting about Sheikh Yusuf al-Bahrani. Sheikh Yusuf al-Bahrani, rahimahullah, was really famous for living at a time when the dispute between the Akhbaris and the Usulis was getting really heated. And so his major opponents used to say, you know, that salat behind Yusuf Bahrani is not acceptable because he's a, you know, we don't consider him a believer because he follows the Akhbari school. He's not an Usuli. Sheikh Yusuf al-Bahrani, they used to say to him, you know, what do you think of praying behind so-and-so, the scholar who takfired you, who said you can't pray behind him? Sheikh Yusuf al-Bahrani, what he used to say, yeah, you can pray behind him. He says his research led him to that conclusion, and my research led me to this conclusion. And this is wonderful akhlaq from one of the scholars of our madhab. Wonderful akhlaq. This is the akhlaq that we need more of within our school of thought. Instead of scholars raging at each other over the most minor disagreement, Sheikh Yusuf al-Bahrani, you know, he says, you know, I'm a researcher, he's a researcher. He came to his conclusion and I've come to mine. Sayyid Muhsin al-Amini, rahimahullah, in his book, he's a Lebanese scholar. Shout out to the Lebanese brothers and sisters. In his book, A'yan al-Shia, which is a biographical dictionary of Shia scholars, he mentions the following. In his book, A'yan al-Shia, he mentions Wa'ad, meaning he's referring to an opponent of the Shia. Wa'adda fi safha 111, and he counted on page 111, al-Qaramita min firaq al-Shia. He's saying this opponent of the Shia says that the Qaramita are a group of Shia. وَالشِّيعَ تَبْرَأْ مِنَ الْقَرَامِطَةِ وَمِنْ كُلِّ مَنْ خَالَفْ شَيْئًا مِنْ شَرَائِعِ الْإِسْلَامِ. He says, and we are innocent. The Shia are innocent of this group, and we are innocent of any group that contradicts the laws of Islam. And this is a beautiful saying from the Sayyid, because upon this until this day we are still upon that manhaj. Any terrorist group that appears in the Islamic world, we are innocent of them and we do not consider them Muslims. Baqir Sharif Qurashi, who's a more modern scholar, you can find pictures of him online, and he wrote many great books. But today we'll be quoting his Mawsu'a of Amir al-Mu'mineen Salamullahi alayh, the encyclopedia on the life of Imam Ali Salamullahi alayh, volume 6, page 113. He says, the Qaramita appeared on the stage of Islamic life, spreading corruption, murder, looting, and destruction. And they permitted what God Almighty has forbidden, and have forbidden what God has permitted. And they are like communists in their teaching and their disavowal of religion. And they permitted the killing of the Alawi Sayyids, for they killed a group of their notables whose names were mentioned by Abu al-Faraj al-Isfahani. And they were known for their nasb and their enmity towards Ahlul Bayt. Abu Tahir Sulaiman ibn al-Hasan al-Jannabi, one of their leaders, occupied the holy cities of Najaf and Karbala, and he did not stop to visit the holy shrines. So if you read the source, what does he say in Arabic? ظهرت القرامطة على مسرح الحياة الإسلامية فأشاعت الفساد والقتل والنهب والدمار وقد أحلت ما حرم الله تعالى وحرمت ما أحل الله وهي كالشيوعية في تعاليمها ومروقها من الدين وقد استباحوا قتل السادة العلويين. They used to kill the Sayyids, the descendants of Rasulullah, who opposed their regime. فقد قتلوا كوكبة من أعلامهم ذكر أسماءهم أبو الفرج الإصفهاني. He says these people used to target Sayyids, the descendants of Rasulullah, and they used to kill them. And unfortunately, to this day, we see groups carrying out such attacks, targeting not only the Shia of the Ahlul Bayt, but specifically the Sada. When we see that this is what a more modern scholar says, he says these people were basically communists, and he mentions that their leader, the one who led the attack on the Kaaba, right? He says this man occupied Najaf and Karbala. He attacked Najaf and Karbala as well. He didn't even stop to visit the Imams. So how can anyone in their right mind claim that these people are Shia? Now, this should be more than enough evidence to prove that these people are not Shia. But should our opponents still insist on their ignorance, let us show them what their own scholars say. Ibn Taymiyyah says the following in his Majmu' al-Fatawa, volume 35, page 162. He says, وَهُمْ مِنَ الْقَرَامِطَ الْبَاطِنِيَّةِ الَّذِينَ أكثر من اليهود ومشركي العرب وغايتهم أن يكونوا فلاسفة على مذهب أرسطو وأمثلة أو مجوسا وقولهم مركب من قول الفلاسفة والمجوس ويظهرون التشيع نفاقا والله أعلم. So what is Ibn Taymiyyah saying here? He says the Qaramita are worse than the Jews, the Christians, and the Arab idolaters, and their aspiration is to become philosophers in the Aristotelian school and similar doctrines, or then they want to combine it with Zoroastrianism, and their speech is a combination of that of the philosophers and the Zoroastrians, and they falsely show belief in Tashayyu', and Allah knows best. What's Ibn Taymiyyah saying here? He's saying these heretics, they believe in some strange mix of Zoroastrianism and Greek philosophy, and they falsely show Tashayyu' hypocritically. So what does that mean? Why are they falsely showing Tashayyu'? His student al-Dhahabi gives us a more clear picture. In his book, Tarikh al-Islam, volume 20, page 234, he says the following: وَتَحَيَّلُوا عَلَى الْمُسْلِمِينَ بِطُرُقْ شَتَّى وَنَفَقْ قَوْلَهُمْ عَلَى الجُّهَّالِ وَأَهْلُ الْبَرِّ وَيَدْخُلُونَ عَلى الشِّيَعَةِ بِمَا يُوَافِقَهُمْ وَعَلى السُّنَّةِ بِمَا يُوافِقَهُمْ وَيَخْدَعُونَ الطَّوَائِفِ وَيَظْهُرُونَ لِكُلِّ فِرْقَةٍ أَنَّهُمْ مِنْهُمْ. So what is al-Dhahabi saying here? He says that these people, the Qaramita, what they used to do, they used to target the ignorant people, and they used to target the people who live in rural areas. They would mislead the Muslims in different ways, and they would dissimulate their speech for the ignorant and the righteous. They associated with the Shia through what they agreed upon, and they associated with the Sunnis through what they agreed upon as well. Thus, they misled all the sects, giving them the impression that they belong to them, i.e. to all the sects. And this shows you just how dangerous this group was. As in, when they came to the Shia, they would pretend to be Shia. When they come to the Sunnis, they pretend to be Sunnis. As in a lot of modern political groups, this is how you build a political movement, is you try to convince everyone that you're for them, that you're looking out for the little guy, that you're looking out for big business, that you're looking out for the small-time farmer in southern Iraq, as well as for the pious Shia Muslim who believes the Ahlul Bayt are oppressed. So this terrorist group, one of the tactics that they used to use in order to spread their movement was by essentially pretending to be Shia when they were among the Shia, and pretending to be Sunnis when they were among the Sunnis. And so we've shown you that not only do the Shia scholars make it clear that we do not consider these people Shia or even Muslims, but even the Sunnis, big enemy opponents of the Shia like Ibn Taymiyyah and al-Dhahabi, make it clear that these people were not even Shia to begin with. Moving on. So we have shown you that our scholars refuted the Qaramita and wrote against them and tried their best to warn people of their misguidance and their kufr. But what about Shia political figures? Did we ever respond to the Qaramita with any political or military moves? The answer comes in two stages. Firstly, the Qaramita, before sacking Mecca, used to attack all over the Islamic world. As in, at one point they were attacking Syria, and they came dangerously close to conquering Bilad al-Sham. Had the Qaramita taken Bilad al-Sham, who knows what kind of damage they would have caused. So, who stopped them? Who stopped the Qaramita from conquering Bilad al-Sham? The Hamdanids. So if you look at the family tree that I've posted, Bani Hamdan ibn Hamdun are a very, very interesting dynasty. And I believe I've discussed them before. And of course, Saif ad-Dawla al-Hamdani, everyone knows here that I'm a huge fan. Hamdan ibn Hamdun is the man who gave his name to this family, to this dynasty. Hamdan ibn Hamdun, interestingly, began his career as a Khariji. He did khuruj against the Abbasid Khalifa, and he joined the Khawarij. His son, Hussein, essentially fought against him. He turned against his father, and he teamed up with the Abbasid Khalifa and defeated his father. And because the Abbasid Khalifa was so grateful to Hussein for helping him defeat the Khawarij, he forgave his father. Hussein ibn Hamdan then became one of the most cunning and capable generals within the Abbasid army. As in, the Abbasids, any opponent they had, they would send him against them. And he led a corps of 500 horsemen from his tribe of Bani Taghlib. So Hussein ibn Hamdan, if the Abbasids had a problem with anyone in the Islamic world, he had him to deal with it. One of these opponents was the Dulafids, or the Dulafids in modern-day Iraq. He defeated them. Then the Khawarij. But then when the Qaramita arose in Syria, the Abbasids received messages desperately calling on the government for help. And so the Abbasids sent Al-Hussein ibn Hamdan under the command of their commander, they appointed to Syria in order to stop this movement from conquering Syria. And so Hussein ibn Hamdan, also if you look at the family tree, he is the uncle of the famous Shia Amir Saif al-Dawla al-Hamdani and his brother Nasr al-Dawla. And Abu Firas al-Hamdani, the famous Hamdani poet, has many poems praising Hussein ibn Hamdan for his heroic exploits. So in the year 291 after Hijrah, he participated in the decisive battle of Hama. So this was the battle between the Qaramatah and between the Abbasid government. Had the Abbasids lost this battle, Islamic history as we know it could have changed horribly. So the Qaramatah by this point had captured Homs, Hama, Ba'albak, Ma'arrat al-Nu'man, and even Salamiyah. And so Muhammad ibn Sulaiman al-Katib was the commander of the Muslim forces. And so Tabari, this is in the very last volume of his book where he records this battle. But before we dive in, Hussein ibn Hamdan, what madhab did he follow? Hussein ibn Hamdan, if we analyze his biography, it becomes clear that he was a Shia Muslim. And his brother, who is, I believe his name was Abdullah, if we look at the family tree, the father of Saif al-Dawla, or Abu al-Hayja Abdullah, he was also an Imami Shia, and he famously rebuilt the shrine of Imam Ali, Salamullahi alayhi, in Najaf. And his son, Saif al-Dawla, as we all know, was a huge proponent of Shi'ism in Bilad al-Sham, transforming Aleppo into Shia Imami HQ in Bilad al-Sham, while the rest of Bilad al-Sham was mostly under Isma'ili influence. But should we have any doubt, again, we will consult the Encyclopedia of Islam. Encyclopedia of Islam, when it talks about what ended up happening to Hussein ibn Hamdan, it is said that he was involved in a conspiracy to further the Shi'i cause. And so this conspiracy, unfortunately, it failed, and so he was executed for treason. And so it's unknown whether or not this rebellion was led to spread Shi'ism, or if it was just simply political. So this is a huge matter of dispute between the modern scholars. And so it is well known that this family, that Bani Hamdan ibn Hamdun, they became Shia. They're one of the most famous Shia dynasties in Islamic history. And so now that we know he's Shia, let's see what exactly he did with the Qaramatah. So we read, and this is the last volume of Tarikh al-Tabari. As in Tabari, his account for this battle comes from the letter that the general sent back to the Abbasid Khalifa after the battle was over. And so this is the account that he gives in Tarikh al-Tabari. I believe this is volume 38, page 137 to 138 in the English version. He says the following. And keep in mind, this is the general who led this battle. This is his victory dispatch back to Baghdad. He writes, "When we were in sight of each other, the squadron on their left wing attacked, whipping their horses, and moved towards Al-Hussein ibn Hamdan, who was on the flank of the right wing. Al-Hussein, may God bless him and give him a good reward." Why? Why is the commander praising him so much? "Personally confronted them with all the men who were with them. Using their lances, they broke them in the Qarmatians' breasts, whereupon the Qarmatians withdrew from them. When the Qarmatians resumed their attack against them, they took their swords, striking the enemies in their faces. During the final onslaught, 600 horsemen of the wicked unbelievers fell. Al-Hussein's men seized 500 horses and 400 silver necklaces. The Qaramatah turned their backs and fled, and Hussein pursued them. They counterattacked incessantly, making onslaught after onslaught. In the course of these engagements, one group of theirs after the other fell, until Almighty God had annihilated them. Less than 200 of their men escaped." It seems wiping out terrorist groups in Syria is something we've been doing since medieval times. Wouldn't you agree, brothers? So if we look at the footnote 572, the annotation says, possibly Al-Hussein started moving, Miskawayh, At-Tajarub. In summarizing the victory dispatch, states that Hussein was the architect of the victory, and he was praised very highly for this by Muhammad ibn Sulaiman. As in, had it not been for this commander, for this Imami Shia commander and his group of elite horsemen, it is very probable that the Qaramatah could have won this battle. But Hussein ibn Hamdan smashed them. After the Battle of Hama, the Qaramatah would never again endanger the people of Bilad al-Sham. And Hussein ibn Hamdan, after this battle, he took part in the reconquest of Egypt that ended the Tulanid control over Egypt. And so the Abbasid commander offered him rule over Egypt, but he preferred to return to his native northern Iraq. And so, fortunately for him, though, his younger brother and his nephew Saif ad-Dawla would continue his legacy of being awesome, right? So that's the first encounter between the Qaramita and the Imami Shia. So this is when we saved Syria from the Qaramita. But who dealt them the final blow? Because the Qaramita, if we pull up a map of where they were geographically located, the location of the Qaramita, we will see that it is in modern-day eastern Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait. This is where their movement was centered, in eastern Arabia. From eastern Arabia, they would, launch their attacks on the rest of the Islamic world. So the Qaramita, in order to defeat them, you'd have to defeat them on their home turf. So who was it, in fact, that stopped them? Because as we know, after this battle, the sack of Mecca happens after this battle, because the Abbasid government, unfortunately, due to its corruption and its inability to handle its own affairs, the Qaramita continued to launch their raids and continued to launch their attacks. And so the final blow for the Qaramita came from another Shia dynasty. This dynasty is called the Uyunids, or Ad-Dawla al-Uyuniyya. So the Uyunid dynasty is the dynasty that converted modern-day eastern Saudi Arabia, as in Qatif, Bahrain, parts of Qatar. These are the people who planted the seed for Shiism in eastern Arabia, the Uyunid dynasty. And so if we consult the Encyclopedia of Islam to read about them, it says the following. The Uyunids, a minor dynasty of medieval Arabia, whose capital was Al-Qatif, ruled over Al-Hasa or Al-Hasa in eastern Arabia from the 5th to 7th or the 11th to the 13th century. They destroyed the Qaramita there in 467 or 1076, although little is known of their history. And unfortunately, we do not have too many accounts on the way this state functioned. But what we know is they rose to power by destroying the Qaramita. So their leader, the founder of their dynasty, Abdullah ibn Ali al-Uyuni, he is the one who defeated the Qaramita finally, who brought an end to their state in eastern Arabia. And so the celebrated Uyuni poet Ali ibn al-Muqrab al-Uyuni recorded poetry confirming this. So if we read the book Anwar al-Badriyin fi Tarajum Ulama al-Qatif wal-Ahsa wal-Hasa wal-Bahrain, he records one of these poems that the native son of the Uyunids, that this poem he recorded. Sha'ar al-Madhab Ali ibn Muqrab al-Uyuni says, Sal al-Qaramita man shadha jamajimahum, and ask the Qaramita, who was it that slashed their skulls? And so this is, one of their poets, he's flexing, is like, we're the ones who defeated the Qaramita. And so the question becomes, were the Qaramita Sunni or Shia? Because as we noted earlier, there's not too much history about them. Because unfortunately in Eastern Arabia, not many people could read or write at the time. How things change after discovering petroleum. So a famous scholar, a famous researcher, and I believe he's Sunni, his name was Naif al-Shira'an, if I'm saying his name correctly. He, in his research regarding the Uyunid dynasty, he comes to the conclusion, he says, these people were Imami Shia. Why? He writes the following in his book. He wrote a book called Nuqud ad-Dawla al-Uyuniyya fil Bahrain. I believe this researcher is from the state of Bahrain. He writes on one of his pages, Aliyun waliyullah. ألحقت هذه العبارة بشهادة التوحيد على معظم نقود الدولة العيونية. موضوع الدراسة, meaning the topic that this book is about, حيث نقشت في السطر الثالث من كتابات مركز الوجوه. وتمثل هذه العبارة أهم باب المبشيعي. So for those of you who can't speak Arabic, what does that mean? Aliyun waliyullah. This phrase follows the phrases testifying to Tawheed on the coins of the Uyunid dynasty, the topic of research. And it was minted on the third line at the center of the face of the coin. And this phrase signifies one of the most foundational beliefs of the Shia sect. So he argues, he says, the Uyunids are the Uyunids are Shia, because we know from the coins minted during the time of their dynasty. And so these coins can be seen in the British Museum, but safe. Are you just going to tell us that, or are you going to show us? Of course I'm going to show you. Of course. I don't just make scans of books. I make scans of things in museums as well. So it says at the bottom of this picture, نقود الدولة العيونية في بلاد البحرين. And this is by the biographer Ash-Shir'an in 2002. Look what it says on the third line of the coin. Aliyun waliyullah. So not only did the Imami Shia save the Islamic world from these terrorists, we're the ones who dealt them the knockout punch. Alhamdulillah. And so now that we've defended ourselves, let's see. When it comes to the Qaramita, we said their worst crime was their desecration of Allah's sacred house in Mecca. In Islamic history, there was another famous individual who, during his dynasty, or during his rule, his reign, he also famously attacked not only Mecca and the Kaaba, but he also attacked Medina. Who is this ruler? Let's ask Imam Jalaluddin al-Suyuti in his book, Tarikh al-Khulafa. What does he say? In his book, Tarikh al-Khulafa, he records the following. He records in 63 AH, Yazid ibn Muawiyah was informed that the people of Medina have rejected him and are preparing to wage war upon him. Knowing this, Yazid sent a huge army to Medina and declared war upon the people of Medina. After looting Medina, he sent the army to fight Abdullah ibn Zubayr in Mecca. And so the incident of Harra took place. Do you know what Al-Harra is? Regarding it, Al-Hasan al-Basri, who's a tabi'i, said, by Allah, when Medina was attacked, there remained not a single person who was safe from it. A group of companions and others were killed, and Medina was looted, and thousands of virgin girls were raped. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. And I'm quoting Suyuti here, that Inna lillahi has this book. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said, whoever frightens the people of Medina, then Allah will frighten them, the attackers. May the la'nat of Allah, His malaika, and all the people be upon such a person. And he says this is recorded in Sahih Muslim, but this is not in the modern copy. The reason why the people of Medina did not give bay'ah to Yazid was because he indulged in too many sins. And so he says the following. Imam al-Waqidi narrates from Hanbala, from Abdullah ibn Hanbala, son of al-Ghasil, who is a companion of Rasulullah. He said, by Allah, we did not revolt against Yazid until we feared that we would be showered with stones from the sky. He was a man who used to penetrate his mothers, meaning his father's wives, sisters, and daughters, and he used to drink openly and neglected prayers. Imam al-Dhahabi said when Yazid did such things with the people of Medina, although he was indulging in drinking and other deeds before, then the people of Mecca also revolted against him and rose against him from four sides. And then Allah did not put barakah into the life of Yazid. And then the army of Al-Harra went to Mecca to fight Ibn Zubayr. Then the commander of the army died along. Then someone else succeeded him, and they went to Mecca and surrounded Ibn Zubayr and fought with him and threw on them fireballs with the catapults. And this happened in the month of Safar in the year 64 after Hijrah. And as a result, their fire covered the Kaaba, its roof, and the horn of the goat, which was sacrificed for Ismail, which was on the roof of the Kaaba, all burned down. Then Allah destroyed Yazid in the middle of the month of Rabi' al-Awwal of that year. And when the news of his death came to Mecca, the fight was still going. And Ibn Zubayr announced, O people of Sham, your tyrant has died. They were disturbed and the people arrested them. Then Ibn Zubayr called the people to pay him allegiance and called himself caliph. And the people of Sham paid allegiance to Muawiyah, son of Yazid, but his reign was not so long as it will be mentioned later. And this is Tarikh al-Khulafa, page 167. So when it comes to the hadith, one of the brothers posted it for me. This is a scan that I made. The Prophet said, whoever frightens the people of Medina is cursed by Allah. And this is sahih, and it is mentioned in multiple other sources. So according to Imam Suyuti, it used to be in Sahih Muslim, but I couldn't find it. So I think this is just another example of Sahih Muslim suffering from some sort of changes. In Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya by Ibn Kathir, who's a huge fan of the Umayyads, he says the following. He says, Yazid committed a big mistake by telling Muslim ibn Uqba to continue with the bloodshed in Medina for 3 days. This was a huge and fahisha mistake, and the bloodshed of Sahaba and their sons was further added to it while it had just been previously mentioned that Hussein and his Sahaba had been killed at the hands of Ibn Ziyad. During these 3 days, such huge crimes were committed that cannot be counted and cannot be mentioned, and only Allah knows about them. Yazid, by sending Muslim ibn Utbah, had sought to strengthen the roots of his government and extend it without any obstacle. But contrary to his wishes, Allah punished him and became an obstacle to his desires. And Allah, who breaks the backbone of the oppressors, likewise broke the backbone of Yazid, and he apprehended him in the same manner that a powerful, all-conquering individual apprehends someone. Even thus is the grasp of thy Lord when he graspeth the townships while they are doing wrong. Lo, his grasp is painful, very strong. That's Bidayah wa Nihaya, volume 11, page 627. Ibn Hazm paints another dim image of what Yazid did during his reign. Ibn Hazm records in his book, which is Jawami' al-Sira wa Khams Rasail Ukhra, page 357 to 358, he says, the oath of allegiance was given to Yazid. It occurred following the death of his father. His title was Abu Khalid. Hussein ibn Ali and Abdullah ibn Zubayr refused to pledge allegiance. Then Hussein, peace be upon him, left for Kufa, and he was martyred before entering Kufa. This was the third sad incident following the death of Uthman, and the fourth one following the death of Umar, and was an interruption in Islam because oppression was openly declared against the Muslims with his martyrdom. Abdullah ibn Zubayr then went to Mecca, wherein he sought refuge in the house of Allah and resided there. Yazid sent his army towards Medina and Mecca, that amongst the holy sites of Allah. So in the battle of Harra, those of Muhajirun and Ansar that remained therein were killed. And this horrendous incident is also among the worst tragic incidents of Islam, creating a break in it because esteemed Muslims, the remnants of the Sahaba and the honorable Tabi'een, were openly killed in it or apprehended and martyred. The horses of Yazid's army were present in the mosque of the Holy Prophet and in Riyadul Jannah, between the grave of Rasulullah and his pulpit. They defecated therein. No prayer was offered during those days. And there remained none save Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib, radwanullahi ta'ala alayhi, was a companion of Imam Zayn al-Abidin. He did not leave the mosque at all. And Amr ibn Uthman ibn Affan and Marwan ibn al-Hakam, had they not testified to him being insane to Muslim ibn Uqbah, la'anahullah, the leader of the army of Yazid, he would have likewise been killed. He, Muslim ibn Uqbah, also compelled people to administer their oaths of allegiance on the conditions that they were the slaves of Yazid ibn Mu'awiyah, whether he sells them or frees them. And when an individual said he would pledge allegiance on the condition the allegiance was pursuant to the Quran and the Sunnah, an order was made to kill him. The said individual was subsequently captured and killed. This sinner, Muslim ibn Uqbah, insulted Islam immensely. There was looting in Medina for 3 days. The companions of Rasulullah were insulted and maltreated. Their houses were robbed. The army then surrounded Mecca and stoned the house of Allah via catapults. And this was done under the supervision of Hussein ibn Numayr by the Syrian battalions. And this was because the sinner Ibn Uqbah died 3 days after the Battle of Harra, and the leader was now Hussein ibn Numayr. Allah likewise apprehended Yazid in the same manner. The owner of power and glory apprehends others. He died in under 3 months, but over 2 months. That is between 2 and 3. And Yazid's forces returned from Mecca. Yazid died on the 15th of Rabi' al-Awwal, 64 Hijri. He was just above 30. His mother was Maysoon bint Bahdal al-Kalbiyah, and the era of his rule was 3 years, 8 months, and a few days. Reading over these awful accounts, and this is besides the atrocity committed at Karbala, your brothers and sisters, as in Sayyid al-Shuhada had tried his absolute best to warn the Muslims against this tyrant, but unfortunately they did not heed his call. And as a result, the Muslim Ummah suffered immensely. And so that the source I've just posted it. So now these sources should be more than enough to confirm to anyone that Yazid ibn Muawiyah, would we consider him a terrorist? We say absolutely. Nothing warrants the killing of innocent civilians, especially Muslims, especially the Ahlul Bayt of the Prophet and the people of Mecca and Medina. Nothing warranted these awful atrocities. Now let us see, what was it that the Sunni ulama, some of the major Sunni ulama, said regarding Yazid ibn Mu'awiyah. So for the Ash'ari, one of their major scholars, Al-Ghazali, says the following in his book Ihya Ulumuddin. He says, and for those of you who don't know who Al-Ghazali is, give him a Google, he's huge. فَإِنْ قِيلْ هَلْ يَجُوزْ لَعْنْ يَزِيدَ بأنه قاتل الحسين أو أمر به قلنا هذا لم يثبت أصلا فلا يجوز أن يقال أنه قتله أو أمر به ما لم يثبت فضلا عن اللعنة. Says, curse, Habibi, Yazid didn't, it's unconfirmed whether Yazid killed Hussein or gave the order of killing him. We're not even allowed to accuse him of such a thing, let alone doing la'na of him. Oh no, can't do la'na of Yazid ibn Muawiyah. He's a good guy. He's a Muslim. Can't do la'na of Yazid. How could you do such a horrible, awful thing? Correct? That's Al-Ghazali. But should the Sunnis argue, I'm a Salafi, I don't take from Ash'ari, that's fine. Let's see what Ibn Taymiyyah had to say about Yazid ibn Muawiyah. Ibn Taymiyyah in his book Minhaj al-Sunnah records the following. He says, وَالْجَوَابِ أَنَّ الْقَوْلِ فِي لَعْنَةِ يَزِيدَ كَالْقَوْلِ فِي لَعْنَةِ أَمْثَالِهِ مِنَ الْمُلُوكِ الْخُلَفَاءِ. Regarding La'n Yazid, it's the same as cursing any king, which, by the way, he believes is impermissible. You're not allowed to curse a Muslim king. وَغَيْرَهُمْ وَيَزِيد خَيْرٌ مِنْ غَيْرِهِ. Yazid is not just any king. He was a good king. خَيْرٌ مِنَ الْمُخْتَارِ ibn Abi Ubayd al-Thaqafi Amir al-Iraq. Allah. The killer of Imam al-Hussein and the man who attacked Mecca and Medina is better than the man who avenged Imam al-Hussein, who went after his killers. الذي أظهر الانتقام من قتلة الحسين. فإن هذا ادعى أن جبرائيل يأتيه وخير من الحجاج بن يوسف إنه أظلم من يزيد باتفاق الناس. Yeah, he's not as bad as Mukhtar or Hajjaj. Right? The killer is better than the avenger, as one of the brothers said. And so if there was anyone has any doubt, saying it's the same as other kings, what's his view regarding, cursing other kings? What does he have to say about it? This is what he has to say. In his book, Majma' al-Fatawa, he says, وَالصَّوَابِ, the correct answer, هُوَ مَا عَلَيْهِ الْأَئِمَّةِ مِنْ أَنَّهُ لَا يُخَصْ بِمَحَبَّةٍ وَلَا يَلْعَنْ or وَلَا يُلْعَنْ. Yazid, you can't love him, but you can't hate him either. You can't curse Yazid. وَمَعْ هَذَا فَإِنْ كَانَ فَاسِقًا أَوْ ظَالِمًا فَلِلَّهِ يَغْفِرُ لِلْفَاسِقِ وَلِلظَّالِمِ. If he was a fasiq or a zalim, that's okay. Allah forgives the fasiq and the zalim. Allah will forgive Yazid. لَا سِيَمَا إِذَا أَتَى بِحَسَنَاتٍ عَظِيمَةٍ. Especially if he has great good deeds. Yazid has some great deeds, mashallah. وقد روى البخاري في صحيحه عن ابن عمر رضي الله عنه قال أول جيش يغزو القسطنطينية مغفور له وأول جيش غزاها كان أميرهم يزيد بن معاوية وكان معه أبو أيوب الأنصاري رضي الله عنه. It's like, Yazid has some great deeds, right? He's not just any normal guy. Yazid fought against in the attack on Constantinople. We know from basic historical analysis, Yazid did not take part in the siege of Constantinople. This is a myth. On top of that, even Ibn Hajar Asqalani in his Fath al-Bari, his analysis of this hadith, he argues this does not apply to Yazid ibn Muawiyah. It does not apply to Muawiyah or his son Yazid ibn Muawiyah. Now that we've seen how some major scholars of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, we've covered the Ash'ari, we've covered the Salafis, the Atharis. Let's see what the Wahhabiyah have to say regarding terrorism. Have they followed in the footsteps of their great noble Khalifa, Yazid ibn Muawiyah? Let's see. We read in the book Ad-Durar al-Sunniyah fi al-Ajwaba al-Najdiyah, which is a Wahhabi book. وقال الإمام سعود بن عبد العزيز بن محمد سعود رحمه الله تعالى. In one of his letters, he says the following. He's responding to someone. وَقَوْلَكْ إِنَّا أَخَذْنَا كَرْبَلَاء. This is referring to the infamous Wahhabi sack of Karbala. وَذَبَحْنَا أَهْلَهَا. We attacked Karbala and we killed its people. وَأَخَذْنَا أَمْوَالَهَا. And we took the possessions of the people. فَالْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. Alhamdulillah that we did such a thing. We're proud of doing such a thing, of attacking a city and harming innocent civilians and taking their lives and property. وَلَا نَعْتَذِرْ مِنْ ذَلِكَ. We're not even gonna, we don't owe anyone an apology about this. وَنَقُولُ وَلِلْكَافِرِينَ أَمْثَالُهَا. Because we consider you people kuffar. We believe doing these things to you is fine. Absolutely. acts of terrorism against people who disagree with us are absolutely justified. And so with that being said, my dear brothers and sisters, we ask ourselves the simple question, who is more worthy of the legacy of the Qaramatah, us or our opponents? Who is more worthy of the legacy of Ali Umayyah, of Yazid ibn Muawiyah, us or our opponents? And so we will conclude with an ayah of the Quran. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Ya ayyuhalladhina La yaskhar qawm min qawm asa ay yakunu khayran minhum. O you who have believed, let not a people ridicule another people. Perhaps they may be better than them. Do not ridicule us for attacking the Kaaba. We never did such a thing. But as for you, you did it time and time again. And God only knows how many times it will happen again before the dhuhur of Sahib al-Zaman. Salamullahi alayhi. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you all have all benefited and that you have all learned something. I thank you all for attending. I'm very, very happy that all of you took the time to come listen to me. And if you have any questions, we'll do our best to answer them. وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآله